Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name's Mason, and I'm gonna be talking to you today about songwriting. I'm gonna make sure that you're able to tap into your innermost creative and display that to the world. Make sure that you got stuff that's sounding good, it's feeling good, and other people can love. The feel. One of the first things that you need to worry about when making music is connecting to what I call the feel. When we're making music, we're often listening to production or guitar or piano or just the melodies that are in our head. And oftentimes we're going to come up with ways to attack it, but we're never identifying the feelings. A lot of people, when they first start writing songs, they're not in tune enough to question what they're feeling. And in regular life, when you have an interaction with a loved one or a person on the street, you feel something and then you act. So in songwriting, we should do the same thing. We should be having a conversation with the music and the melodies that are in our head or around us. And when we identify that feeling, it gives us a little bit more direction as to where to go when we start writing things like lyrics, flows, and other melodies in the song. What's in and what's out? I like to start a lot of songs by identifying the feeling, taking that feeling and all of the vocabulary that I have in my head and started to categorize it based off of those feelings. When you want to identify the right words to add to the lyricism and you're focusing on that emotion, you want to be either direct or you want to focus on the antithesis. So if you're making a love song and it's all a confession of how much you love someone, you can be direct and you can say, you make me feel happy. Or you can say something that's the antithesis of that, saying, I'll never leave you. Leaving somebody being in a negative act, but you're describing it in a positive way. What you're trying to do is identify the statements that most connect with those feelings and eliminate all of the stuff that's in between. A lot of the times we're searching for words and media that we consume, like proper nouns and things that we can throw in to songs that have nothing to do with the emotion. And so then you start to try to work things in that don't really fit. If you're starting to, in your head, categorize things based off of the emotions, that's how you start to develop a concept. And the concept is the meat and the potatoes of the song, because that's really like the plot to any story. And like we said, all you're doing is telling a story. Developing a concept. When you're developing a concept for a song, you really want to take something small and make it big, or take something big and make it small. A lot of the times when we're hearing these melodies in our head or we're listening to production, we are either thinking of something like, oh, this makes me feel sad. Or this reminds me of the time when I was riding on a school bus in high school. If you're thinking of you riding on a school bus in high school, that's a really detailed and complex experience. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not relatable to other people, but you are going to want to expand upon it to make sure that it's relatable. So a lot of the times I tend to do this in the chorus. You know that your verses are going to be the parts where you're really describing the story. So think about it in a script, it would be more of the dialogue. And the big action scene would be something like the hook. So if you felt on the school bus like you were ashamed or you were bullied or something like that, then you really want to focus on the word shame or the word or the emotion of feeling bullied, and find words that say that right away. Because in the verses, you know you're going to tell your story about being bullied or being sad or looking at the girl that you love with another guy on the school bus. And that's how you can make sure that your concepts are relatable. On the other side of that, if you hear a song and you're saying it makes me feel sad, you might want to make the verses really emotional and use blanketed statements about the girl that's leaving me or the girl that's with the other guy, or, you know, something that's really, really basic for people to connect to, and then get complex on the hook. So tell your story in a short period of time. So that way you're maintaining this balance between authenticity and relatability. You can have the most specific song and tell the most specific story. And if it feels authentic, people will find the ways to connect to it and relate it to their own story. If you don't have that authenticity, nobody has anything to connect to, which is why artists these days use social media as such a powerful tool, because it gives people an opportunity to look into your life and know you and understand who you are. If you're an artist that isn't gonna aim for the social media base, then you really have to tell your stories in songs, and you really have to have people understand who you are just by listening and feel like they can connect to you. So it's really, really important to make sure that you're developing a concept in a thoughtful way and making sure that you're keeping your audience in mind when it comes to relatability. It's really easy to be you unless you're just targeting some chart topper and trying to mimic that. Don't do that, because that person already told their story. Make sure you tell yours. Study, study, study. Before we go into all of the details in songwriting, the first thing that you need to do is your research. And I think this goes for anything in life, any art form, any goals that you have to study the people that did it before you. So what I love to do, I've done it today, I do it every day, is tune into other artists and see how they're doing it, see how they're writing their songs, see what perspective they're coming from, and analyze how they're making you feel. Take the good parts, eliminate the bad parts, and start to form your own pathway towards your own artistry. We can't just dive in to any art form without knowing how other people have done it before. Because even if you're good at it from the get-go, you haven't developed anything yet. And so it's great to tune into people that have already developed the art form that you're trying to become great at. Every master needs to study the masters that came before them. So make sure that you're listening to music and you're really diving deep into what you love or hate about an artist or hate about their songwriting, and find ways to avoid those parts and lean into the parts that you like. Make it sound good. The most important thing to do in songwriting is to make it sound good. We talked about research. When you're listening to other artists and you're figuring out what makes records sound good, the more that you analyze that, the more that you pay attention to what they're doing with their melodies, the better off you are when it comes to building a template. You don't get anywhere with your concept. You don't get anywhere with your lyrics. You don't get anywhere with your flows. You don't get anywhere with your songwriting at all if it doesn't sound good. So make sure that you identify what makes songs sound good and incorporate it into everything that you're writing. So that way, people can give you a chance to see how deep you're going and how poetic you can be and how authentic you are. Trimming the fat. One of the most common mistakes that I see in amateur songwriting is leaving in too many syllables or taking out too many syllables. When you're writing a melody to production, that's going to be the connection between the feeling that you get from the production and the expression of that feeling. In between those two things is all of the relatability. So your authenticity is your initial reaction. You might write a melody that goes la, 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 la. And that's probably because the production inspired you to do that. And that feeling that you are identifying is the complete idea that you haven't yet brought to life with your lyricism. The further you get away from those melodies with extra syllables, like let's say you're going la 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 la, it's kind of close, but it's not on point. You're creating a gap in between your authenticity, your expression, that feeling, and you're making it so that way the listener is getting further and further away from that complete thought that you had when you were able to take a step back and look at the song and approach it in a certain way. If you don't have relatability, you lost your connection. Your subconscious is your best friend. It knows the melodies that are catchy. It knows the things that you're consciously identifying as great before you even identify it. So you want to trust in that speaks to your melodies, and then you want to make sure that it cooperates with the other side of your brain that's bringing the lyrics in. And the more they're together and in unison, the better that you're going to be able to connect with your audience. No cheap stuff. One of the most painful things to watch is songwriters that try cheap cliches and tricks to make a hit. If you pay attention to the way that artists are making these hits or these viral sensations, 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you that they were in the studio and they weren't even trying to make a hit, but they were goofing off and they did a dance and then they started naming the dance and then they sung the song and made it after that dance, and then it became a viral sensation. That's because they're using that feeling that we were talking about to connect to the production, and it becomes intrinsic whenever other people are listening to it. Don't try to aim for that. Don't try to mimic something. Find your own feeling, find your own way to express that, and find your own way to connect to your audience while doing that. One of the cliches that I really hate is fire. People often want to say fire and flames in their hooks or in their pre-choruses or in their verses, and I think it might come from us being children, and it's like, don't touch the stove. And so it's an extreme reaction with the world around us for the first time. And so as men, we just go directly to that first thing that was keeping our shelter warm and cooking our food. Whatever it is, it's making people say fire and flames a lot. And when I hear that from people, it drives me crazy, and I don't understand why they don't try to go further and find out, okay, what am I trying to say with this word fire or this word flames? And maybe I can develop something unique and original. Because if you're not being original in some kind of way, you're not really an artist. There are no rules. Ultimately, there are no rules. So when I say that I hate the cliche fire or flames, I would also love it for an artist to write something with the word fire or the word flames in it that just speaks to my soul and tells me, damn, this is a good song. Because there's really no rules about writing a good song. It's just something that we know. We've been singing happy birthday from day one. So you don't really have to worry about the concepts. You don't have to worry about the lyricism. You don't have to worry about the flow. It goes back to what sounds good. And as much as you want to be able to know where you're coming from when you're creating, and as much as these things can help you as far as expanding your horizons in songwriting and being able to write yourself out of a corner, it doesn't matter. You can throw it all out or you can use it accordingly. Just make sure you're being you and make sure that you're having fun with it. And a lot of the times, the people that are listening are going to connect with that. Just give them something to connect to. Write like you're at the gym. One of the most obvious things that a songwriter needs to do is to write songs. It's simple, but it's a concept that I feel like a lot of people miss out on. When we're writing music, it's a lot like playing basketball. You're in the studio, you're hearing a song or a beat, and you're feeling really good about it, so you want to take your shots. You want to take your shot at writing a really dope hook. You want to take your shot at writing a really dope verse. You want to wow the room with your talent. But to be truly great, you're going to have to run your laps. You're going to have to lift your weights, and you're going to have to do it when you don't want to do it. So create habits where you're writing songs even when you're not in the mood to write songs. I recommend that every songwriter numbers a piece of paper 1 through 32, the length of 2 rap verses, 16 bars each. If you're writing songs that aren't rap, it still helps to just have 32 lines. And every single day, fill out those 32 lines. It's not all going to be good. You got to write some crappy music. But what you're doing is you're training your brain to complete an action despite how you feel about that action. And it's only going to strengthen the tools that you have. The talent and your natural affinity for songwriting is really the basics. If you want to start to develop your pen and be great at it and be in a situation where at any point somebody can ask you to write a song in this genre and do something that's at least satisfactory, you have to be so used to and so comfortable at writing songs that you can do it at any moment despite your emotional state. You might have had the worst day possible and you're in the studio with Pharrell and he's saying, we have to write something for Despicable Me. So Happy has got to come out. And if you aren't able to tap into those emotions by sheer repetition, you won't be able to tap into those emotions at all. You're going to learn things like how to leave your emotions at the door. You're going to learn things like how to find word association faster. And you're going to be able to develop all these different tools at an accelerated pace so that way you can truly be a professional and masterful songwriter. I hope that through some of these things that we talked about, you can, develop your songwriting skills to take everything to the next level. I find it funny in interview styles versus songwriting where I talk a lot about identity. I talk a lot about connectivity. I talked a lot about, tapping in with your emotions. And that repetition that's going to be in the way that I'm describing how to talk about things is the kind of the opposite way that I do my art. But I hope that you gain to the balance between the two. I hope you are able to learn repetition, and I hope that you're able to go with the flow and find the harmony and balance in between. They say never meet your heroes, but Black Thought was cool. Within my family tree, I take my hat off the roots. Salute the big dogs. We Shad Moss and Snoop, except it took me 30 years to get my ass off the stoop. Drugs, man. On one hand, the rap bars was proof, Mad Dog. The other hand was to smack Dr. Drew. Stole scripts, sold hits to old kids that slap box at school and told them, fasten chastity belts and padlock your boobs. Now I got it. They asked why I wasn't getting it younger. I was eating pussy, so it isn't the hunger. It was the visions, liquor, bitches, and positions I'm under. Smoking nice to the face, so it isn't a wonder. And I ain't trying to glorify that sort of life or to die. I know my father probably mortified by my horror side, but I done wrote enough chorus lines for the guy to understand that troubled men are the only ones immortalized.